In this episode, we move from having an incident response plan on paper to practicing what that plan would feel like when people actually have to use it. For brand new learners, this is where security becomes much more real, because a plan may look clear and impressive until the moment a team tries to act on it under pressure. Incident response, IR, is not just about knowing the right words or having a document stored somewhere safe. It is about helping real people make decisions, communicate clearly, protect important systems and data, and stay coordinated when events are confusing and time feels limited. That is why rehearsing matters so much. Exercises, testing, and tabletop thinking give an organization a way to discover whether its response approach actually works before a real incident forces everyone to learn the hard way in front of customers, leaders, and affected users. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. An IR exercise is a planned activity designed to help people practice how they would respond to a security event. The purpose is not to create drama for its own sake or to embarrass people for what they do not know. The real purpose is to reveal how well the organization understands its own process, where confusion might appear, what decisions slow things down, and whether important roles know how to work together. A beginner should think of an exercise as a form of rehearsal rather than a performance. In a rehearsal, the goal is not perfection. The goal is to learn where the weak spots are while there is still time to improve them. This makes exercises incredibly valuable because real incidents rarely arrive at a convenient time or in a neat, easy-to-understand form. Practicing ahead of time helps people build confidence, improve judgment, and create muscle memory around coordination rather than relying only on hope. One of the biggest reasons rehearsals matter is that stress changes how people think. A response plan that seems straightforward during a quiet meeting can feel much less clear when systems are failing, leaders are asking for updates, users are affected, and nobody yet knows how serious the incident really is. Under pressure, people may skip steps, misunderstand who has authority, share information too broadly, or become so focused on technical details that they lose sight of business impact. A good exercise helps expose those problems in a controlled environment. That makes it possible to strengthen the plan before a real event creates harm. It also helps people notice that response is not just a technical activity. It includes communication, prioritization, evidence handling, decision-making, escalation, and coordination across multiple teams. Without rehearsal, organizations often discover these weaknesses only after time has already been lost and mistakes have already affected the outcome. The title of this episode includes both testing and tabletop thinking, and that distinction matters. Testing usually suggests some form of deliberate validation, where the organization checks whether a process, communication path, decision point, or control works as expected. Tabletop thinking is often more discussion-based. People walk through a realistic scenario together, talk through what they would do, explain why they would make those choices, and uncover assumptions that might otherwise stay hidden. For beginners, the easiest way to understand the difference is this. Testing often asks whether something functions. Tabletop thinking often asks whether people understand how to act when the function matters. Both are valuable because response plans fail in different ways. Sometimes a tool or workflow does not work properly. Other times the people involved are uncertain, misaligned, or unclear about responsibility. Rehearsing well means giving attention to both the functional side of response and the human side of response. A tabletop exercise works especially well for beginners because it slows the situation down just enough for people to think clearly without removing the realism of pressure altogether. Participants are given a scenario, such as suspicious login behavior, malware spreading through endpoints, unauthorized access to sensitive data, or an outage tied to a possible ransomware event. They then talk through what they would notice first, who they would notify, what information they would need, how they would contain the situation, and what business concerns might change the response. This is powerful because the conversation often reveals gaps that documents never show on their own. A team may realize it does not know who approves certain actions, who communicates with executives, how to involve legal or human resources staff, or what evidence must be preserved before systems are changed. Tabletop exercises help people discover those gaps while the stakes are low enough to pause, reflect, and improve instead of improvising under real damage. A good exercise scenario needs to feel realistic enough to matter, but simple enough that the learning does not get buried under technical detail. Beginners sometimes assume a useful exercise must be extremely complicated in order to be taken seriously. In practice, overly complex scenarios can confuse participants and prevent the real lessons from emerging. A stronger approach is to build around a believable event that touches important systems, meaningful data, and likely decisions. For example, a suspected phishing incident leading to unusual account activity can be a very strong exercise because it raises questions about access, scope, communication, evidence, and business risk without requiring deep technical specialization from everyone in the room. The scenario should create enough uncertainty to force decisions, because real incidents are rarely obvious at the beginning. At the same time, it should not become so tangled that participants spend all their time trying to decode the setup instead of thinking through the response itself. Roles matter tremendously during exercises because response quality depends on people understanding not only what needs to be done, but who is expected to do it. A common weakness in immature response planning is that everyone assumes someone else will take care of a key task. The security team may assume legal will decide on notification, while legal assumes security will provide decisions it cannot actually provide alone. Operations staff may wait for leadership approval, while leadership assumes the responders already know what authority they have. A rehearsal helps surface those mismatched expectations before they become a crisis. Beginners should learn that an IR exercise is not just for technical specialists. It should include the people who would actually shape or influence a real response, including managers, communicators, legal advisors, privacy staff, business owners, and sometimes outside partners if they truly play a role. Response succeeds when responsibilities are clear enough that teams can move together instead of colliding or hesitating. Communication is one of the most valuable parts of tabletop thinking because a real incident rarely fails only because someone lacked technical knowledge. It often fails because the right information did not reach the right people in the right form at the right time. An exercise helps people practice that information flow. Participants can talk through what should be escalated immediately, what should be confirmed before broader sharing, what leaders need to know, what technical teams need to know, and how uncertainty should be communicated without causing confusion or panic. This matters because response communications have to balance speed, accuracy, and restraint. Share too little, and important decisions get delayed. Share too much, and sensitive or misleading information may spread before the facts are understood. Rehearsing communication gives teams a better feel for that balance. It helps them learn how to speak clearly about risk, impact, and next steps even when the situation is still changing and many details remain unresolved. Exercises also help organizations think more carefully about decision points, which are the moments when someone must choose a direction under incomplete information. That may include deciding whether to isolate a system, reset accounts, contact outside counsel, notify leadership, involve law enforcement, or shift from simple investigation into formal incident status. These choices sound obvious after the fact, but they can be difficult in the middle of uncertainty. A tabletop discussion gives participants a chance to explore how those decisions would actually be made. Who has authority, what evidence is needed, what business trade-offs matter, and how quickly the choice must happen are all questions that become clearer through rehearsal. This is one reason exercises are so valuable even when no one touches a keyboard. They train thinking. They help teams realize that response is not only about activity. It is also about judgment. The more often people practice those judgment moments, the less likely they are to freeze, overreact, or create inconsistent decisions when a real incident begins unfolding. Another major benefit of rehearsals is that they help connect technical response with business reality. A purely technical discussion may focus on logs, compromised accounts, malicious files, or affected systems, but an actual incident often reaches much farther than that. It may interrupt operations, affect customers, damage trust, create regulatory duties, or force leaders to make uncomfortable choices about service availability and public communication. Tabletop thinking helps teams remember that incident response exists inside the larger organization, not outside it. Participants can ask what systems matter most to the business, what downtime would be unacceptable, what data exposure would create the greatest harm, and what departments would need timely involvement. For beginners, this is an important shift because it shows that security response is not only about stopping bad technical activity. It is about helping the organization manage risk, preserve trust, and recover in a way that aligns technical action with mission priorities. Good exercises usually include uncertainty and change, because that reflects how real incidents unfold. At first, an event may look small, then new evidence suggests it is wider. A suspected phishing case may turn into a broader account compromise. An unusual login may later connect to privilege changes or sensitive data access. A service outage may first look accidental and then begin to resemble deliberate disruption. Tabletop thinking becomes stronger when the scenario evolves in stages, because participants have to adapt rather than simply recite a static plan. This helps reveal whether the team can revise its assumptions as new facts appear. It also shows whether communication, authority, and decision-making still hold together when the situation changes shape. For beginners, this is a valuable lesson. Real response work is not just about following a script. It is about adjusting thoughtfully while still staying anchored to process, roles, and core priorities as the picture becomes clearer over time. It is important to understand that the goal of an exercise is not to prove that the team is flawless. In fact, a very smooth exercise with no confusion and no lessons may actually mean the scenario was too simple, the conversation stayed too shallow, or participants avoided difficult issues. Success in a rehearsal usually means the organization learned something useful about how it would really perform. That might include noticing that the escalation path is unclear, that key leaders need different reporting, that evidence handling guidance is weak, or that one team assumed another team owned a task it never actually accepted. Those findings are valuable because they create the chance to improve while the cost of learning is still low. Beginners should not think of exercises as pass or fail events. They are learning tools. The organization wins when it discovers weaknesses early enough to strengthen them, not when everyone leaves the room believing the discussion sounded polished. There are also some common mistakes that reduce the value of incident response rehearsals. One mistake is turning the session into a lecture instead of an exercise. If one expert talks the whole time while everyone else listens, the organization learns very little about real coordination. Another mistake is making the scenario so unrealistic that people treat it like a game rather than a serious practice opportunity. A third mistake is focusing only on technology while ignoring business communication, legal concerns, privacy issues, executive decision-making, or data handling responsibilities. Yet another mistake is running the exercise and then failing to follow through on the lessons it revealed. Rehearsal without improvement becomes theater rather than preparation. The whole point is to identify gaps, assign fixes, update plans, clarify roles, and then rehearse again later to see whether the organization actually got stronger. Practice matters, but learning from practice is what creates resilience. This is why after-action review is such a critical part of tabletop thinking and testing. Once the discussion or exercise ends, the organization should reflect on what was clear, what was confusing, what decisions took too long, what information was missing, and what changes would make the next response stronger. That review should be honest but not punishing. People are much more likely to surface real problems if they believe the purpose is improvement rather than blame. Over time, these reviews help the response plan evolve from a generic document into something shaped by the organization's actual risks, actual teams, and actual operating style. For beginners, this shows that incident readiness is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is a practice of repetition, adjustment, and learning. Every exercise should leave the plan a little clearer, the team a little more coordinated, and the decision-making a little more confident than it was before. As we close, the central idea is that rehearsing incident response turns readiness from assumption into evidence. Testing helps validate that processes and pathways work, while tabletop thinking helps people reason through uncertainty, responsibility, communication, and judgment before a real incident forces those skills into action. Together, they help organizations discover where plans are strong, where confusion still exists, and what must improve so that response becomes faster, calmer, and more reliable. For a beginner, this is one of the most practical lessons in cybersecurity because it shows that good response is not built in the middle of a crisis. It is built ahead of time through repetition, reflection, and thoughtful practice. When teams rehearse seriously and learn honestly, they are far better prepared to protect systems, data, and trust when a genuine security event puts the organization under pressure.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.